Welcome to the Doty Stew podcast, and today's guest is Debbie Geyer, running for Idaho Seat 11. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're going to start with a really tough question right off the bat. What are we going to do about Bigfoot living in Idaho rent-free?
Well, I think somebody better capture him.
We better capture him first and ask him some questions.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, starting out, this is your first legislative run. So what inspired you to run for the Idaho legislature?
Well, as some of you know, I've been involved with government for many years in the realm of being a city clerk. But prior to being in Caldwell, I had actually worked for the state of Texas in the Texas Department of Health. And then, of course, my husband's retired military. And I was actually a contractor through the federal for the chapel system there and did some work there during our time of being within the chaplaincy program for U.S. military. And so government has always been of interest to me. And I think that's because it's a way to serve and give back to our country, to our state, and of course to our city, which I was very involved with.
Yes, you were.
24 years as the Caldwell City Clerk, and I loved it because I felt like I was able to serve our community in a way that I couldn't done of any other. Through projects, there was plenty of those, but it was basically that one-on-one with our constituents, our citizens, and being able to help them. Whatever their case may be, whatever their needs may be, I wanted to be there as maybe a conduit to get them the information that they needed, and then to maybe to help guide them with the process, with the code, as well as the statute, just whatever it would take in order to do the best for our community.
Yeah, certainly your public service is well noted, and we certainly appreciate all the time you spent at the city of Caldwell. I think we probably know the answer to this, but why now? You recently retired from the city of Caldwell, so is this the time that you've chosen?
Yes, it was, and it wasn't something that I'd had thought about 5 years ago. Of course, my realm was local government, and I love that. So state government is a new realm to me for the state of Idaho, but yes, it's another avenue where I felt like maybe I could help maybe bring a voice about local government and the concerns that we've had and have seen over the last few years, even the local government that was instituted through different legislation on through the state, and maybe bring some of that information to the seat there, and again, speak for our constituents.
Yeah, and I think your experience at the city and seeing some of the laws that the legislature makes.
Yes.
House Bill 389 has really hurt cities. So what are you gonna do to bring that experience to the legislature to ensure they're not making rash decisions for all cities, that one size fits all?
I think part of that is the research. There's lots of legislation that's always brought forward. But I think the bottom line is to be the voice of our constituents, be it our city leaders and our government there, as well as just the citizens themselves. It has been a trend in the last few years that I've seen is there's been a lot of laws that brought forward and maybe not totally encompassing the necessary research that says, hey, we're concerned. The citizens are concerned, and these are the points. Bring it to the table, do the research, listen to it, and then make a wise decision that's best for our communities as well as to the state of Idaho. You're right. House Bill 389 has been a detriment to not just Caldwell. It's throughout the state. There's been a lot of talk about that. And I'm hoping that that can be brought back to the legislature to do some amendments to that. There's already been some that has come forward this last year. But it needs to be to the larger cities as well, because we're filling it with our infrastructure. Our budget process has been truly affected by that. I think it needs to be reviewed.
Yeah, and certainly with new legislators coming in, sometimes there's a hidden factor that people believe they just know everything about everything. And of course, getting behind those bills, they certainly want them to pass.
Yes.
And so sometimes it's hard to get off that hill when a valid concern is brought up.
I agree.
What are the top concerns that you're hearing from your constituents in our area?
Well, education is one, making sure that we don't defund our state schools, and I think that's important. Although I'm all about school choice, I think that was a great move, actually, because it benefits more than just the private school. It's the home school, it's the charter schools, it's, the public schools. All of it's in the mix there. I myself am a graduate from Greenlee Friends Academy, and my husband is, and our son was the same way. So I can see the benefits. It's not just for the privileged, which some people think that that's what that is on a state level with that program, but it's not. Private education is for all. And certain children have just certain needs, and there's different ways of learning. And private education, charter schools, homeschool, public education, they're all faceted to meet the need of the children. And I think that's a great one. The other thing that I've heard a lot about is mental health. We lack some really good facilities dealing with mental health on a state level. Coming from Texas, I've seen how they handled that there, and there's county that's involved with their hospitals there, and so they're meeting those needs. But what I've heard from many at the door that were emergency nurses especially brought this forward to me, some others that have actually experienced it within their family, is mental health is passed on from program to program to program to program, and basically there isn't really anything substantial within a long-term situation that can be handled within families, especially with adolescents. It's frustrating to the families that we don't have a necessary program beyond, the various agencies and organizations, which is great, but there needs to be more to that they can actually house for long-term treatment.
And coming from a law enforcement background, it's often law enforcement
Yes.
that certainly is not trained, though it's getting better in that area. And oftentimes it can end in tragedy
Yes.
when maybe it shouldn't. However, I clearly want to support our police officers, as you know, and say
Yes.
they definitely need to protect themselves. But sometimes it's from mental health issues that haven't been treated. And I would say not even just our society, but even the workers within the state of Idaho or anywhere that anyone works, we often lack help in that area. That's
I think
for sure.
so too. And
Yeah.
like I said, I've seen it in other states where it has worked, and maybe those options need to be evaluated and researched a little bit more to maybe bring to the table again. I'm all about partnerships, making sure that voices are being heard and that we address some of these areas, of course. And then obviously property and taxes is a big issue right now, making sure with just the inflation as it is, it's a strain. We know that, not just for property taxes itself, but maybe like irrigation, all of those sort of things are of issue to maintain and be able to keep your home.
Yeah.
So we want to do all we can, obviously, in the legislature to make sure that there's a sound basis to that where you can afford to still buy a home and keep a home here in Caldwell.
Well, let's talk about that elephant in the room then. So, of course, Idaho is booming with growth. So what plans do you have to balance that growth with keeping our culture here in Idaho?
Well, it's always a fine line because ag is everything. I mean, I love Caldwell because you can be walking downtown and soon you're out in the fields and enjoying that as well. I mean, ag is just part of my childhood here and love it. When we moved 20-some years ago back into Caldwell, I couldn't believe how the whole environment had changed here because, of course, I remember it as many, many areas of agriculture, and, of course, that has been absorbed by a lot of development. Somebody mentioned to me the other day, well, how do you keep ag and that fine line here between urbanization and then development and keep it in perspective? I really like to see what Caldwell has done recently with their comprehensive plan, and what they did even with the area of impact is that they reevaluated and that said, wait a minute, we need to bring those lines in. We don't need to be so far out with some of this area of impact. We need to reevaluate where that line in the sand is drawn. And I think probably that could be applicable to more than just our community, is others. Looking again, by state code, you have to reevaluate that with the county on a routine basis. And I think it needs to be evaluated to say, can we allow more for the agricultural area and be more cognizant of what's really needed there? Because you don't want infiltration when it's, especially like, for instance, our seed companies. They can't be corrupted by any type of urbanization of even backyard plants and trees and whatnot. So there needs to be something that's put into place, and I think that's the area of impact that needs to be a partnership between the cities and the counties to really making sure that we are hearing what they're saying, what we need to do as far as cities, and being able to control that.
Do you think the state should step in and help? Because oftentimes they want cities or counties to pay to preserve that farm ground. There aren't millions of dollars in the budgets to do that.
Right.
Do you see a path forward for the state to help with that?
That very well could be something that could be researched.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that as the obviously agriculture seems to be a culprit of where that growth is really being affected, and I think we need to be very sensitive to that. We are Idaho. Agriculture is not just for the sake of the farmers; it's the economy for this state as well, and so we need to be cognizant of that.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the military. I know that you're a strong supporter of the military.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So have you noticed anything where Idaho is lacking, or what more we could focus on for our veterans?
Well, I was very glad to see that in this last year there had been a bill put forward through the budgeting process that was going to eliminate some dollars to help our National Guard, Idaho National Guard, with their education benefit. And I was so glad that that was reevaluated, because that's dear to my heart, is making sure that those benefits for the military is in place. National Guard recruiting for the National Guard that's one of those benefits to say, hey, yes, I want to be a part of this, because this is something they don't qualify for the GI Bill. This is a state program that they qualify for. So those sort of things we need to be aware of and saying, hey, what's the long-term effect of those benefits being reduced or taken away that is going to affect recruiting? We need to obviously making sure that our communities are safe, and the National Guard does a great job of doing that for the entire state of Idaho. Of course, my husband's retired military chaplain, and so this is dear to our heart. He actually finished his career through the National Guard and has spoken to some of those young recruitants and counseled them, and knowing that that was dear to them as well, as making sure that those benefits were in place to not just help them, but their families as well, and for their future as to education, and then just long-term disabilities, whatever the case may be, that we can help them with. I'm so much of a supporter with our Colo Veterans Memorial Hall here. They do a great job of meeting the needs of our veterans. Local, obviously, is important, because some of them can't make it over to Boise. Some of the veterans that need assistance with service officers, it's right here within our community. I'm hoping that other communities can step up and do the same thing.
Yeah, and we've already talked a little bit about education, but it's certainly important, and now you start taking that away. And for some families, because of the rise in cost of education, that is a way that they can serve both the state of Idaho and often their country as a whole.
Absolutely.
And still continue their education. So it just gives one more option to that.
It does. And
Yeah.
a lot of them enter the military one form or another through maybe ROTC, through the Idaho National Guard, through just the military itself. Whatever the case is, those benefits were part of the package that they signed the dotted line on. And we need to be very aware that these are necessary to continue. We made a promise to them at the time that they were recruited. Let's keep the promise.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about reducing taxes, as you're aware.
Yes.
So I guess out of the two, you have the grocery tax and then, of course, eliminating property tax. Would you like to speak a little on that?
Well, I know this is a new concept to me, too. And, of course, I've been reading up on that. I know that the Idaho Republican Convention was just completed this last week. And unfortunately, my husband and I were out of town, and I was not able to attend the convention this year. But I have pulled down the resolutions and then their new platform. And, of course, that was one of the resolutions that was proposed to take to the legislature for consideration of the removal of the property taxes. I think it's a wonderful concept. We just need to make sure that we are covering our bases, because the local government entities are reliant on property tax. That's what pays for infrastructure. That's what is our service bases for many of our benefits that we offer to our communities. So whatever is going to be put in place in order to replace that, we need to make sure that it is going to be sound and it's sustainable. So with that in mind, there's going to be some research that is going to continue on my part. I'd like to hear that out. And of course, being my first year into that, I want to hear the testimony and actually hear the plan as to what they're thinking on that. This is, like I said, I think that's a great idea, but I did read the Association of Idaho Cities comments on it, and they're concerned as well because they realize the property tax is very beneficial to the county and to the cities to which it goes back to. And we cannot take away those benefits as far as infrastructure, many of the programs, and for even into like the libraries, all of that. We need to make sure that the fees don't increase so far on the other side of the coin that now it puts a burden in that realm as well. So you've got to make it up somehow. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to know a little bit more about that as I get into the legislature and as to what they're going to be proposing as far as the replacement of those funds.
And it creates another issue, right? So we have people concerned about the growth coming to Idaho, and then having property taxes. Well, if you get rid of the property taxes, the door's going to be knocking to come to Idaho, right? So then you're going to have that issue. So oftentimes we
trade one for the other.
Yeah, look too far ahead and go, yeah, it'd be great to get rid of the property tax. But by the way, I don't like growth either. And since you're representing me in state government, could you stop both of those things? And one may very well produce more growth in our state if people see that we don't have property tax here.
That's a very good point. Mm-hmm. And yes, I'm thinking people that are wanting to relocate, especially for their forever homes. Mm-hmm. I hear that a lot, that's why they have come here is because of, well, for one, Idaho is just a beautiful state and it has a lot to offer. But of course, it is lower in property taxes than a lot of the neighboring states throughout the United States. We are one of the lower ones to start with. So again, yes, if you don't like the growth that we're seeing already, we need to consider that as well.
Yeah, and if we're going to make it up, we certainly need to attract businesses then.
Yes.
And small businesses oftentimes struggle more than large corporations. Mm-hmm. Do you see any, I guess, relief to bring small businesses to Idaho? Meaning, I guess if you go to, if the impact fees get so high that a corporation can certainly write a check for those impact fees, almost no matter how high they get, which is great. However, if you're trying to start a small mom and pop and your fees for your permits are just as much, it often cancels that great idea that someone may have.
And again, this is going to take a lot of sharpening the pencil to making sure that it's fair for all, because it can't just be a certain tax bracket that we're speaking to. It needs to be something, like I said, it's sustainable, that we're welcoming businesses here, and it's not all the big box stores that we want. Especially in our communities in our downtown, we want those mom and pop businesses. We want those boutiques and the smaller antique stores and novelty stores and bookstores. We've got to make it so that they are able to stay in business as well. Yes.
Yeah, and based on your research up to this point, let's get into housing a little bit. And of course, everybody wants more affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Have you researched any ideas? I mean, clearly no one's come up with the one-size-fits-all answer yet, or it'd be sweeping the nation. But have you looked at any legislation or have any ideas on how to make housing more affordable?
Well, I do know that obviously there has been some legislation that was even passed this last year that will be effective in July in regards to the density and making that a little bit more favorable to development, so that there isn't as much infrastructure required sometimes with that multiple housing over basically single family housing and those sort of things. So all of those, I think the legislature has really done a great job in being able to hear on the side of contractors especially. I do know it's interesting for contractors when these impact fees are just seeming a mountain to them, that again, we need to making sure that it's fair across the board, and there is no easy answer to this. People in a local community, they're all about, let's just do all the single family housing and let's make the lots large and they're beautiful. And I agree, they are beautiful, but you have to have a mix. I don't even understand sometimes the differential of how it has just totally gone over the top even on the sake of rental. Wow, these young marrieds or these young college students just getting out of their education and trying to establish where they're going to be working and whatnot, it has to be a direct hardship on them. So there has to be something that we need to do to say, okay, we want to welcome all realms of income here. Not everything, quote unquote, is affordable at this point, obviously. What we think is affordable and what a newlywed family is thinking is affordable, there has to be some fluctuation there. There has to be some give and take. We want to make sure that everyone's cared for. I know coming from Europe, we saw how many houses had to be added on to or even, expanded to the rooftops here because they couldn't afford housing. You live with the family and you just add another wing to the house. You add another floor to the house. That's not what we're wanting here. We want to be able to say, yeah, I am a homeowner, and here's how I was able to obtain that. If that's through some kind of housing savings program, I think that's a great idea, just like we have it for education. There's some promotion there that has made some allowances for that. Let's look at some options that, again, speaks to even transition housing, where they can start here with, apartments, then go to maybe some condos or townhouses, and then eventually have that single-family home. Although sometimes when you're talking forever homes with some of the retirees, they want those ones that are the townhouses or the condos. Yeah. They don't have to keep up a yard anymore. Yes, it is. And so everybody has a different need. So we need to think on those realms and not just one size fits all. We need to make sure that we're adaptable in that, but yet, on the other hand, knowing that there's a lot of, like I said, controversy with the ag and how the cities are being formed with more and more multiple housing. We need to be cognizant of what our constituents are saying as well. There are concerns with that. They don't want it in their backyard. They want to still have their privacy and those type of things. And I get that. I've been on the side of the city where I've heard that for 20-some years and was on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that is of concern. But again, sometimes I heard a planner one time tell me, he said he'd heard a lot of complaints about, I bought this house and there was this beautiful vacant area and I could see the mountains and, this is why we settled here. And his response was, well, when you bought your home, you probably should have bought that lot next to you so that it would have stayed vacant. And not everybody's being able to do that. So you have to be able to know as a flexible homeowner that development is going to happen. Growth is going to happen here. How we manage it is smart growth and making sure that we don't have sprawl, that we do have more of the infill projects, that we have sufficient funds in order to be able to have those infrastructures in place on the city. Our wastewater treatment plant is built out for more growth. We did that years ago under a bond, and thank goodness we had that foresight because we saw that growth was coming out of the Boise area and coming right down the freeway. And so our leaders at that time allowed for that. But it's going to continue, so we need to stay on top of it and making sure that we do have smart growth in place.
Yeah, and I really like your idea about compromising and meeting in the middle somewhere. Mm-hmm. You can't have half-acre lots in the city limits and stay off the farm ground unless your whole idea is to stop all growth whatsoever. I mean, you've got to have a compromise there.
You do.
So if we don't want to go onto the farm ground, because I think it's often lost that laws are made so that a city can't just say we're not building anything there, or we're not going to have an area of impact, or you own this land but we're not going to let you build anything on it. I think most Republicans believe in private property rights, except sometimes we get in a little bit of a NIMBY, not in my backyard though. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to believe in private property rights, then people should be able to build on their land. And we certainly should focus on higher density in the cities if you want to stay off the farmland. Now, those of us that live in the cities that were once small and it gets bigger, we understand now it's 20 minutes to your favorite store or coffee shop.
And that's the thing I heard door to door in my campaigning process with the traffic. Traffic is always an issue because we're from what we considered at one time a rural area, more so with ag, and it was easy to get from point A to point B. It's not so easy anymore. You have to plan ahead. We lived in a community one time that we were stationed at, and I'll never forget, we lived right close into the community itself. but you always had to plan at least 45 minutes to get from one point of town to from the north to the south or from the east to the west. It was very, very difficult in order to actually manage that traffic there. We don't want to get to that point. So again, that's where the state steps in and says, hey, we need to make sure that our infrastructure is here on our freeways, that they are passable, that they're safe, and that we do have plenty of lanes in order to accommodate the growth here. I think that has been very much of a concern in the Treasure Valley for sure in this past year. And we've seen ITD, and we all know that there's been a lot of orange signs of detours, growth everywhere showing in our traffic here. But again, it has to be managed smartly. It has to making sure that the needs are met of the community, but in a safe, effective way.
Well, I'm glad you talked about safety. So the Idaho State Police will be a part of your discussions while you're at the Idaho State Legislature.
Yes.
And always the number one concern is as soon as they get a raise, of course, then those around them raise their starting wages and longevity wages a lot higher than the state police. So they're struggling to maintain and keep a well-organized and employed state police agency. Do you have any ideas about the state police?
Well, I'm all about backing our blue regarding state police and our local police and our firemen, all about that. We, again, need to bring it to the table and not just turn a deaf ear, because safety is of concern. That's why a lot of people do live in Idaho, is because we feel like we are safe here, that there is sufficient law enforcement to help with those sort of things. And again, we just need to making sure that those needs are met. That's part of the plan of the Republican Party even as well, is making sure that we do back the blue. We don't want to defund when we don't have to. I think that budget situation needs to be returned to an area where we are looking at each of these departments separately, not just carte blanche, everybody gets a reduction, because a lot of that was having to be brought back on an amended basis this last year. And I think maybe we've missed something there. In a local aspect, it's each department is able to present, and then you're looking at them individually, not just across the board. That used to be done through the state as well, through the JFAC, and I'm thinking that that's just usually how that should probably take place, and not just making across the board of some type of reduction, whatever that case is. It needs to be looked at individually, and of course, we want to make sure that we do have sufficient police coverage. ISP is instrumental, and throughout the state. Small communities, large communities, it doesn't make any difference. ISP is there for us. And we've partnered on a local level with ISP to reduce crime, and man, are we thankful for that. So again, we want to make sure that we hear them. They do have a voice at the table.
And I think sometimes it's lost because you see a lot more police officers down here in the higher populated areas.
Yes.
But certainly in our more remote and rural areas, when they need help, it is the state police that responds. And certainly, for instance, the Moscow case that brought so much national attention, we uproot these state troopers from wherever they're at and have them go to that part of the state. It could be for an extended period of time where they have jurisdiction. And certainly it's something they know when they sign on for, but I think it's often forgotten. A lot of these rural areas or small cities don't have the capacity, either within their police department or even just the personnel to gather what needs to be gathered.
You're
in
absolutely
a large
right.
Case.
They're depending on your sheriff, and they're depending on the ISP. And so we need to make sure that we are very much in support of all of those programs, local, county, state. Let's back our blue.
Yeah. So as you look forward to the next 2 years, right? 2 years before you have to do it all over again.
Yes.
What you see now and what do you hope to accomplish in the what would be a success for you?
Well, I think what I have heard a lot from my constituents is they want to be heard. And so my thought is, let's making sure that they are through town hall meetings, whatever the case may be. Those concerns need to be brought forward and at least considered through the state legislature if they're a valid concern. It's something that can be done on that level. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it just needs to be handled at a local level, and the state can't impede in those areas. But let's give everyone a voice at this point. And so my first year, I think, is establishing relationships and making sure that we hear from the different agencies on the state level, as well as our local constituents. The voice needs to be heard at the table. And I'm all about keeping the main thing the main thing. And so that's my philosophy, making sure that we are transparent in our dealings. As my background as city clerk, I'm all about that. And so, again, it's that servant attitude, making sure that I bring what they are considering as constituents, valid points of concern to be heard at the legislative process.
And as we head towards the election, what is something you want your voters to know about Debbie Geyer?
Well, Debbie Geyer is one that I believe in my track record shows honesty, transparency, and diligence. And I'm carrying that forward on a state level. Besides what I've done here in this community, I want to represent us well, but I also want to do what's best for the state of Idaho. So I would appreciate your vote.
There you go. And you and I have worked together for years in different capacities, and I'm certainly grateful for your service and proud of where you're headed.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Brad.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here.
You're more than welcome. Thank
Right.
you.
Take care.